Like, this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time now. We're going to talk about past lives, reincarnation, and how exploring this dimension of ourselves can offer incredible value for healing and transformation. Now, first of all, if you do not believe in past lives, if you're questioning the validity of past lives, that is okay. I'm not here to convince anyone if it's real, if it's not, if it exists, etc. I'm simply going to talk about my experience and how exploring my past life or my soul's blueprint has really helped me understand more about myself, and especially addressing many cycles that I have been experiencing in this life. Now, without a doubt, no matter if it's past life or what the actual story is about ourselves, there is much depth to our life that we will never be able to understand in this lifetime. We can assume, we can feel, we can sense, we can work with people to make sense of the unknown. But truly, and I feel we can all agree on this, that there is so much to ourselves, to our soul, that we will never be able to comprehend fully. However, we can comprehend some aspects of our being by understanding our past life stories and understanding the cycles that we may be encountering in this lifetime, maybe some cyclical relationships or patterns or habits or themes that may be reoccurring in your life. A little bit about my story. I ended up venturing into the akashic records through guidance, through an amazing, incredible akashic reader, probably close to 10 years ago, when I was faced with a multitude of situations in my life that I couldn't explain. And it almost kept becoming more prevalent in my life. It became a stronger theme in my life. These stories, these relationships, situations that were showing up that I couldn't make sense of. And the feeling that I was getting from them was unexplainable. It came from a sense within myself that something else is playing out, something else. There's a bigger story and a bigger context to what I had been experiencing at that time. And I wanted answers. I was in that point in my life where I was ready for more. I was ready for more information. I was ready to explore the depths within my being beyond what I could comprehend. And first, I have to preface that our conscious mind holds a component of our being that likes rational understanding and almost, a level of control, but a level of certainty with what is happening in our life. So our conscious mind is what we can comprehend. It's what we know. It's what we can analyze. It's what we can make sense of. And so when we dip into the unconscious, our conscious mind may react to that there's a mechanism within us that prevents us from venturing into the unknown because our mind cannot comprehend it. Our rational mind cannot understand or make sense of the unknown beneath the surface. And we have been accustomed to living in a rational, logical world, making sense of things, having everything explained, having everything understood through the rational mind, through the conscious mind. Having papers done and analysis done and research done to make sense of what is in the conscious mind, the conscious realm. And so when we go into the notion of past lives, there could be concept here of us being more than we are in this form. That leads us into the unconscious mind. That leads us into the unknown, which can become very scary for a lot of people. That can become also very, it can create a lot of barriers and resistance to even exploring it altogether, right? So it does require a level of openness. But when I was at the time of readiness in my life, when I wanted to know answers, when I was in that place of, yes, I need to make sense of what I can't make sense of, the unexplainable, and then I was ready. There was a level of me wanting to know. And that's just my mind. I'm not a superficial or surface level person. I need to know what's under the surface. I need to get to the root cause, which also is going to take me into another realm of conversation with an area of work that I have been doing over the last several years. But at this moment in time, several years ago, I was ready. I was ready to know some answers. I was ready to look for the answers. I was ready to open my mind to possibilities. So I had booked in with a akashic reader, a very, very good one. I would say I lucked out. I'm very grateful for the experience, because this person was, now I know how it's done, really respected the process of accessing the Akashic records, which, yes, I feel that there is a process to this. I feel that there is a level of respect towards the Akashic records. So the Akashic records are the records of your soul's path, your blueprint, all of your experiences. And yes, in this life form, but also beyond. Because we are multidimensional beings. We have experiences that we have had experiences that we will never be able to even articulate in this form. So when we're here on Earth, I feel, this is from my experience only, I feel that we are here to remember. We are here to remember who we are, most importantly, but we are also here to remember who we are in this form. And through remembrance, we also have to dismantle the pain from our past. We have to dismantle the experiences that we have gone through that have shaped us to who we are today, which I'll get into my story in just a moment, because I've recently also uncovered a new layer within my story that allowed me to move on, but it allowed me to step more into who I am. And I feel that when we make sense of aspects of ourselves, then we release from certain layers and we become more whole during that process. We also become more aligned, because we are remembering who we are aligning with who we are, and then we are becoming more empowered with who we are. So when I first accessed my Akashic records through a reader, she was incredible. It was very ceremonial. There was a process to this. You have keepers of your Akashic records who you need to access to gain access to your records. So she walked me through this process, and it was beautiful. It was an incredible experience. I did go into who I am and why I was experiencing some of the experiences that I had been experiencing during that time, dealing with relationships mostly in my life. Because I also wanted to know the relationships that I had been experiencing were with men, but they were also deep, deep relationships. One was a long 10-year cycle. One was new, but they both had very deep roots, very unexplainable, and hurt a lot. Because of my knowing of the story between these two people, I was allowed to move on. I was allowed to heal those relationships. I was allowed to look at those relationships through a different lens. And for me, it made sense. For me, it made perfect sense. I had the clarity that I needed, but it also opened up an aspect within myself that shifted something greatly. It was very ineffable. It was very unexplainable what happened. So it shifted something greatly, and I feel that it almost fragmented or shattered my level of control and certainty in my conscious level of awareness, my conscious knowing. And it took a long time to adjust. And I feel that venturing into the Akashic, venturing into past life regression, can bring up a lot of emotions, almost even grief, or even reliving some of the pain. So there has to be a level of preparedness to understand that it can take you back to what you've experienced, or it can shift your consciousness in a way that may create an emotional reaction in some form. But this also allows us to see more. It allows us to witness more within ourselves and life itself, and become more aware. Since then, it had created quite a snowball effect of change in my life, I have to say. Up until 4 years ago, I had been repeating very similar cycles in my life. And I'm going to talk about one aspect that I do share every now and then on my videos, and it has to do with me speaking my voice, speaking my truth, doing what I love to do, which is this. But I had a really hard time adjusting to it. I knew that I wanted to do this. I knew that I had a calling to do this. I know that I'm very passionate about doing this, but it has been a huge process for me to feel comfortable doing it. I couldn't speak in front of 3 people. I would stutter. I would stammer. I would second guess myself. I would question myself. And I really had to understand from many different ways why this was happening and how I could work through it and how I could recover from this fear of speaking my truth and being in front of people. And growing up in my life in childhood, not only being not seen and not heard, I was punished greatly for speaking my truth, or eventually I was questioned or even silenced in many ways. And so I started second guessing myself. I started losing confidence with my voice, with what I knew, with who I was. And I became very suppressed. And I became very quiet. And I second guessed myself, and I just went lower and lower and lower and lower into very, very low self-worth, depression, addictions, shame, of course, because I didn't feel that I was smart enough. I didn't feel that I was competent or confident enough, and I completely lost my voice. And so this whole path that I've been on has been a path of remembrance. It has been a path of remembering who I am truly, and more I'm becoming aligned with who I am and what I feel called to do. But over the last several years, I also had another situation that took me back into my past life, which felt very real for me. It felt very real, and it allowed me to heal a very important part of myself. It allowed me to connect the dots. So I saw more of myself, and I saw more of the story, and it made sense of why things were happening the way that they were in my life and why I was creating it. So when I had been doing some unconscious limiting belief work with Charlotte Witzke, who, if she's watching, hi Charlotte, she was on a podcast recently, 2 podcasts on Beyond the Veil, and she had been helping me through the deeper work in the unconscious self, my limiting false beliefs. And through this work, I had been tasting this mucky, disgusting, thick, sludgy taste in my mouth. I couldn't make sense of it. And she was mentioning the witch wound of being persecuted or burned at the stake for speaking my truth and being in my true self, which wasn't really resonating with me. But I understand the comparison, because that does tie into the persecution wound of many of us in society, feeling fearful of being our true self because we can be attacked, or we might feel that we are going to be attacked or persecuted or ostracized, etc. So this is generational. This is past life. If you subscribe to past life, this is from my experience. Definitely believe there's truth to it. But what was happening when we were doing this deep work, the unconscious work, I was getting a taste in my mouth that was very thick and heavy and dark. And then I asked her, I'm going to have to say this in a very friendly way. Did I have my tongue removed in past life for speaking my truth? And she said yes. And I knew it. I knew it. It just made sense to me. It made sense that speaking my truth, which I love to do, I love communicating, which is funny for someone who was so afraid of communicating and so timid and ashamed and afraid and depressed and small. But I love to communicate. It was my air. But it was suppressed within myself, and it became a part of my story in this lifetime because of what had happened in my past. And by connecting the dots, I was able to see the patterns that were happening in this life that I was creating because of how I felt within myself. I felt that I was going to be attacked if I would speak my truth. So I was creating situations where I was being attacked, or I was being silenced or questioned. But I was also feeling very low confidence in myself because of how I felt about myself on a deep level. I hope that makes sense, because that is going into the deep belief system, and that is how we create our reality, is the belief that we have within ourselves based on experiences that we've had in the past. And yes, past life. From my experience, this is my experience only, but I do feel there is a lot of truth to this. We carry in those beliefs into this lifetime, and it plays out in many different ways. And when we can connect the dots with it, we can understand, oh, that's the belief system that I have is playing out in this form, but I can change that. I can change that. And as soon as we witness what the story is, then we get to let it go. We get to become we find peace within ourselves, and we find peace within our past, and we find peace within the story of life. And then everything starts to make sense, right? So I have to also preface that I feel going into past life and going into the Akashic records, exploring past life regression can become very almost an escape mechanism, because I feel that in this life and the pain that we have carried in, the sadness, the sorrow, the fear that we have experienced, that we have become accustomed to, or that has been ingrained within our unconscious, can become very heavy. And when we can look outward at maybe a past life story, or maybe a really interesting story, or maybe I was this person in a past life, and almost using that as an identity or that as a story, we almost are kind of sticking ourselves or putting ourselves, attaching ourselves into the past, like real past, far past, not even past in this lifetime. We're going far back and almost connecting with it and attaching to that story, when that story is simply there for us to understand ourselves more in this lifetime. So I feel that venturing into past life, there has to be a bit of caution that it is not to be used as a way of escaping our life in the present moment, or almost fantasizing about another life, or even as the ego feeding into a story about who we are. A lot of people can use that as a mechanism of feeding the ego, or again, escapism. But I do feel the best way to work with it is to understand the patterns and the stories, and knowing that many of us have thousands of lifetimes on this planet. I've met people with incredible stories. So I feel that when we are here on Earth, we are in a state of remembering the past in a way to change our future, or in a way to heal and transform and move on, or in a way to evolve humanity in some form. So it's a powerful tool to invest into ourselves and to change our future. But it can be used and misused like many other things, like tarot, like psychic readers, almost wanting the answers for our lives from an outside situation, when we need to do the change within ourselves. And I have to also mention, for those watching who are part of the Golden Heart Rising tarot channel that I had years ago, I started reading tarot, and I picked up a tarot deck when I was going through my dark night of the soul. And when I was reading each card and studying each card and learning the symbolism and learning the associations with the meanings, planets, astrology, numerology, etc., it opened a whole new aspect of my being. It unlocked something. And I had the same feeling that I had when I had my first Akashic reading. Something within me changed, and I saw something different about my life due to the fact of having symbols articulate or translate how I had been feeling. And every card I went through, I had been through every single card. I had experienced it. I had lived it. But having it put into words allowed me to make sense of the many experiences that I had gone through. And so when I started reading tarot for other people, I was noticing common threads. I was noticing that people wanted to know, does my ex-partner still love me? Are they going to come back? And I noticed the fear about life and the desperation and the struggle, and people desperately wanting to know what was going to happen, or me telling them what they should do. And I started realizing that this is not going to help us evolve. This is not going to help us change. Having someone tell us what to do, or having someone feed our fear, or wanting us to know something that is going to make our life better. And I should say that it is okay for tarot or for any of these modalities to explore our deeper selves, to make sense of ourselves, but in the way that we can empower ourselves to change ourselves, to create the change that we want in the world or in our life, to heal ourselves, to let go of attachments, to find ourselves. And relationships from past lives, twin flames, soulmates, karmic relationships. We just went through this with the full moon in Libra. All of the relationships, the ones who have maybe persecuted us or tortured us in past lives, if you want to go there. Any kind of those relationships are showing us something about ourselves. And when we can see the story, then we get to open up a whole new experience in our lives. We get to understand more about ourselves and create change. We break cycles. We heal ourselves. We become more enlightened, right? So we are in a cycle right now we are in a time of breaking those cycles, of understanding those cycles and changing them. It's a powerful time right now. So the akashic records are records that you have that basically hold the information of your soul's blueprint, your soul's life, your history. And you can access them. I'm going to leave a link to a book from Lisa Barnett. I read this book. The reader who I worked with, she had studied under Lisa Barnett. She had 30 years of akashic training. And Lisa Barnett has a program also where she teaches people how to read the akashic. But in a book that I was suggested to read, you can learn how to do it yourself. But I do feel that this is a very, I would say, respectful way of accessing the akashic records due to the nature of the practice itself, the depth of the practice. I know there are many readers who can just pull information, and I feel that there is information. I've had situations where I've seen my past lives. I've understood some of other people's stories, and that is very common if you are a seer or if you do this work. There are people who can connect with information right away, but I feel that for the depth of information, if you want to really go deeper and sink into the depths or dimensions of this work, there is a process to it. There is a process that needs to be respected and acknowledged in order to gain the most out of it. And it's like any practice. It's like seeing psychics or other tarot readers, for example. There's always a word of caution. Because there are many dimensions to us, readers can access many different stories that are playing out in our life in a certain time, and things change. Things change so fast, especially now. So it is risky, I feel, trying to gain answers or trying to understand the future or what is going to come when energy is changing and shifting all the time. I have been driven to explore this work for understanding ourselves more so we can create the change and we can understand more about ourselves and our depths. Because we are not going to create the change in our lives if we have a reader telling us that we're going to be ultra successful and we're going to meet the love of our life and they're going to look like this and they're going to be like that. That's not going to matter if we are not creating the change to align with it. And unfortunately, it's a bit of a risk going down that path, wanting to know something out of fear, desperation, loneliness, sadness, or even guilt or anger, wanting to know something for maybe the wrong reasons, which come from the shadow and come from the unconscious self, rather than approaching it from a place of curiosity and how can I use this modality or this information in a way to understand myself more and to empower myself more to create the change that I want in the future. The future is unyet written. So we are creating the future every day by our intentions, our thoughts, our actions, our words. But if we are wanting someone to tell us what is going to happen, then, well, that's fine. You can tell me what's going to happen, but I'm the one that's going to make it happen at the end of the day. And if something shows up for me, I need to be in a place ready to sustain it, ready to nurture it, ready to grow it, ready to accept it. Sometimes we think we're ready. Sometimes we think we're in the right place, but the universe knows exactly when we are and when we aren't. And I'm speaking from experience on that. There are many, many, many layers to this practice. And after reading for a lot of people and seeing a common thread with how people were approaching this work or approaching their lives, it drove me into this work. How can I help people remove from fear, desperation, lack, scarcity, shame, anger, resentment, all of it, and rise into their full potential first, and then create the future that they want? Because that's the way. And the Akashic can help with that, right? So it is a really incredible tool. It's a really incredible experience, I have to say. It opened my eyes to much more in my life. And it allowed me to connect the dots with the past so that I can understand the patterns that were playing out in my life, in this life. So I hope this offered a little bit more guidance on your path forward. I also want to hear maybe your experiences as well. Feel free to drop them below. But I'm wishing you all the best on your path moving forward and beyond. Take care.